When you start looking at things like, I'm going to move certain workloads into a space that maybe I'm not familiar with or I have less control of, begins to become an element of where kind of the configuration management. So from a really understanding, are the policies that I need to have in place on the devices in place? Are we, are we hardened down, locked down, right, from our software perspective the way we need to? So what I'm going to showcase here a little bit is just a real brief tutorial of using the ServiceNow out of the box configuration compliance capability that's along with our SecOps products, and how that marries together with your continuous management, continuous risk and compliance program, tying directly into our IRM solution. So what I'm going to do is just start out kind of as Jay did. I guess there's a theme here, right? Dashboards. So dashboards are really important within ServiceNow, being able to, if the data is there, we can pretty much pivot on it, drill into it, have metrics around it. Other key piece, right? And I think Jay touched on this, but the ability to, for all these dashboards to be interactable. So everything in here allows me to be able to drill into the details behind it. So what I'm looking at here, right, is the idea of, I want to identify, what different authority, what requirements do I have, right, that I'm tracking, and what am I mapping to from a compliance standpoint? And you'll see that compliance roll up follow me through my processes here, which is really important. You want to be able to understand, like, there's two pieces that we're going to talk about. There's the workflow around when a configuration is looked at, right? So we've evaluated a configuration and it fails. We need to be able to build a remediation process. So this is very similar to, if you've been familiar at all with our sister product, the vulnerability response, the idea that when we identify configuration drift on a device, we're able to then build out that remediation process, that integrated process flow to get through that workflow. So we're gonna walk through that a little bit. But you can see, right, we've got a lot of different metrics. I'm going to jump into one of our configuration management, what we call test groups, right? So basically this is a remediation group. So what I've done is I've run a configuration scan. We've pulled back data. The nice thing is that we support multiple third-party products to be able to do this configuration scanning. So you can support it through Qualys or Tenable or other solutions, right, that you might be using already, scanning your environment for things like vulnerabilities that can also look at a lot of these config tests, cloud scanning tools, etc. I'm feeding that data in, and what I'm showing you here right now is essentially the working container of how we're going to manage that element. So when we get that configuration drift, what we're doing is we're getting it bundled together in a group through automated workflows in ServiceNow that's really helping us to drive remediation. So here you can see I've got multiple results where I've actually come back on specific, in this case, right, I had Windows servers deployed as part of that workload package. So using kind of a simple example that's pretty traditional. And what I'm doing here, right, is this pulls all of these failures together that are related. So in this case, it's related to a password history configuration issue, right, which ultimately could result in a risk being a compromise of some sort, right, adding risk to the environment later. What I'm able to do, right, is invoke a change ticket through here, right, that will carry all of this data together, right, and allow me to go through my existing processes that I have to work with my stakeholders to remediate this. So this is a really important piece of the puzzle here, is this group, this ability to remediate with our configuration compliance tool. Along with that, we're going to drill into one of these tests here, so I can talk a little bit more about how do we measure this across from a ServiceNow IRM perspective. So when you look at these test results, right, so this is an individual test that ran against a specific host that failed. Right, so it gives us everything from what we expected to see, what we should have seen, right, as well as what needs to be done for remediation, for the remediation side. But it also marries together the ability to look at what authority docs, what governance requirements do I have in place that I'm trying to comply to, and you'll start seeing this compliance score, as well as what specific requirements does this fall under. And so when we jump across here from this configuration test data directly into the IRM-based control, I'm going to talk about real quick how we do real-time monitoring in the environment, both from a control effectiveness perspective, which is important in itself, but also from a risk perspective. So being able to look at a particular control that's being utilized to mitigate certain risk, and how control failures and the fact that I can watch them in real time through the marriage of these two solutions is going to give me that real-time view. So as you look here, right, I've got this concept of the password standards requirements that I have. So that's going to consist of multiple things. But what you see as I go down into my particular standard here is that I'm applying it to particular business components, right? So, might be business units, might be workloads, it might be defined how your hierarchy works. So depending on how you deploy different systems, applications, configuration requirements. And then what's going to happen is it's going to map to all of the different compliance requirements that we care about in the environment. So it's going to take this broad sweep and help you map to, if you're following PCI or if you're following other hardcore requirements, right, from a governance perspective, then you're going to be able to manage this control once and measure it many times. And then what you're going to see here is I've got these controls that I'm managing for this password standard. And you can see in this case, right, I've got a bunch of non-compliant controls. What's really exciting here is that we literally are linking to that configuration compliance product so that in real time, as you're ingesting the configuration scans that are being run in the environment, and in parallel, right, working on the remediation of those items, we're actually tracking compliance and how that control effectiveness is happening in real time by looking specifically at what we call an indicator. So I'm just going to open up this indicator here real quick. What this indicator is doing, and this is a very unique ServiceNow capability, is allowing us to look at this configuration setting, right? So that's required, and the scan details that's coming back. And when I have a failed record, when I have a failed element, right, associated with a specific what we call CI, right, or an asset, an application, a business process, right, your scope, it's going to automatically fail, right, and help me manage that real-time compliance view. The other piece that's really important about this is that it also ties directly to my risk element, because as you can see, this particular control that I have deployed, what we call a control instance on this Windows server, happens to be tracking as well, right, a risk around configuration drift for cloud services. And so what you're able to see, right, is as I manage this control and its effectiveness or ineffectiveness, it's going to automatically tie back into my risk state as well. Now, this is, again, a key component I just wanted to highlight here a little bit today, understanding that if we take the concepts of what Jay went through, which is really important, it's that business process workflow. How do we manage all of the spider web of things that we need to do in order to be able to take that critical business workload, right, and move it to the cloud in this specific example? And then when we start funneling that down into actionable items, right, tying in ServiceNow IRM and our real-time continuous control and compliance monitoring, as well as continuous risk monitoring, it's a really, really powerful key element that you can start to bring together the various ServiceNow solutions for.